Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm joined by Danny Mendonza and Maya Korbick to talk about building positive money habits in your kids. And I think we kind of went through a lot of different titles with this as to how we were going to approach it. Was it money savvy kids? Was it the next generation of FI? Was it how to teach your kids to be responsible money managers? There was a lot of different, titles we toyed with, but they're all kind of coming together in what we're going to talk about tonight. And that is just, how do we create positive money habits for our kids so that they don't screw up their money when they get older and do the same things that we did probably as adults, which is why we're here tonight. Let me fix our screen so we're all in the right spot, and then we'll introduce ourselves. Danny, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Mendonza, and I work for the ChooseFI International Foundation and wear the elementary hat. And so I have been dabbling in the creation of the elementary curriculum, and then have also gone ahead and put together a 3rd through 5th grade virtual course that will take kids through money basics and learning how to interact with money. So that would be where I find myself now, other than parenting 2 young kids and starting to get into the mix with talking about money with them.
Brilliant. All right. Maya, tell us about you, because you're definitely a new face to our ChooseFI fans.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Maya Korbick. I am a CPA and I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a company called Denari Financial Education Academy, and I've been teaching kids how to be money smart since 2012. And I have also been providing parents with tools and tips on how to teach their kids to be money savvy from the comfort of their home. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Rob, for inviting me.
All right. And my name is Rob Phelan. I am representing ChooseFI Foundation tonight. I'm a high school personal finance and math teacher in Maryland. I also teach young entrepreneurs how to start their own businesses through the Simple Startup. And I'm producing my own book, M is for Money, which is very topical tonight, talking about teaching kids different money words and how to have conversations about money at home. So let's get started. We want to think about now teaching kids about money. And a lot of times the first question I get asked is, well, at what age do you start? And, Danny, what would you say? At what age do we start talking to kids about money?
The first thing that comes to mind is absolutely as young as you can get them talking about money, right? We are going to try and get them to have money conversations because we are not expecting them not to make mistakes. We as adults have made mistakes and are continuing to make mistakes along the way, and we want to live it out in front of our kids. So I have a 22-month-old, a 22-month babe, and then I also have a 4-year-old, and I've actually gone ahead and started to introduce an allowance. So a couple of months ago, about 2 and a bit months ago, when my son turned 4, we introduced the idea of an allowance to him. And just to be clear and kind of what that allowance difference is that's not chores. That allowance is separate from chores, and then also separate. Why I say separate from chores is their expectations as a family member, right? And so that's kind of the differentiation there. And I'm kind of taking and continue to learn from different people in the space. And some people that come to mind is Doug Nordman, and then Carol Pittner, his daughter, and a couple of their lessons that they are sharing through their book, Raising Your Money Savvy Kids for the Next Generation. So we've enjoyed dabbling in that and exploring that with our kids.
Yeah. And, that's a wonderful book. You can find that at choosefi.com/books. I'm sure I have that link somewhere and I'll get that flashed up in a second. But that is one of the books that has been produced by ChooseFI Publishing. Doug and Carol have this, wonderful mindset of here's how we can raise financially savvy kids. And we're going to have Doug come on in one of our future webinar episodes as well. So definitely stay tuned for that one. Maya, what do you think? When do we start?
So it's funny, actually. I used to tell parents, start whenever kids start asking you to buy them things, because at that point in time, they realize that, money is this thing that you exchange to buy things. And that usually happens around the age of 4. And sometimes people will tell me, oh, aren't they too young to learn about money? And I used to tell them, well, no, because you know what, if they can operate an iPad or an iPhone, they're definitely ready to learn the basics of money management as long as we do it in an age appropriate manner. But honestly, Rob, I think in the last year and a bit, I've done a lot of conversations with parents of younger kids. And I think I agree with Danny. I think they are ready to start learning when they're even younger than 4. And it could be even, doing certain things with our kids that translate into financial literacy. So I'll give a couple of examples. Like one example is, let's say they're building a tower out of blocks, right? And so they know they only have a certain number of blocks or certain amount of blocks. Once those blocks are spent on the tower, there's no more left, right? So the same concept eventually gets applied to money. There's an exhaustible source of money. And, once we spend this money is gone. So it's like little things that we can apply from, playing with blocks to, to actually paying with money or managing money. Another example would be like sharing while they're little, sharing with their friends. And that's an important concept that can later on be translated into financial literacy, where, we're sharing our money by donating it and gifting it to people who are less fortunate. So I feel that, they can definitely start understanding some of these concepts when they're younger.
And I think I agree with that like one thing I've really learned from diving into teaching finances to really young kids is that we start with play. And you come down to where they are. And if we think about it from an educator standpoint, this is a constructivist approach where you are building knowledge onto things that they already know and understand. So you're not introducing this brand new concept that they have no connection to in their everyday lives. You're really trying to bring it down to a level that they understand, and then just building on top of that. So for those of you who are not educators, that's basically what constructivism is. You attach new knowledge to old knowledge, and that's a great way to connect with kids. Is something like blocks, is something like, their little play cash register at home, different, exhaustible resources that they only have a fixed number of them. So how are you going to allocate them? All right, Danny, you opened up a massive can of worms by talking about allowances. So why don't we go there? Because that is probably one of the most controversial things I hear when I talk to parents about what do you do with an allowance. Is like, oh, they should have one. No, they should not have one. It should be for chores. It should not be for chores. It's earned. It's not earned. It's going to totally spoil your kid. It's not. What's your, what research did you do? What mindset do you have about it? And what are you trying to teach your kids by giving them an allowance?
Absolutely. I did smile when it was mentioned about kids already asking for things. So one of the things that I realized with my 4-year-old is he was asking when we went to the store for certain things. And so what I realized is this instant gratification and this need, right, versus want, and different terms that you could in the financial space talk to your kids about. And I was realizing that a lot of these conversations were easy to have. I just had to go ahead and start having them because they were already asking great questions. And that's where the allowance side of things came in, is we were realizing, basically wearing a teacher hat, and I have taught at a school in Virginia for 6 years prior to staying home with my young kids. I taught 3rd grade, but I was aware in terms of dabbling and learning, wearing the teacher hat, that kids might not understand the value of money until roughly 5 or 6 in terms of understanding the quantity of coins. So a nickel, a dime, etc., and the difference. But they do understand how to count, and they are interested in different aspects of counting and interacting with objects if they are interested in it, from blocks to Lego. So where the allowance came in for me was my kid was already wanting things. And so we went to the store and I looked at a Lego. He's very interested in Legos. And I took the amount of a Lego and put it back into the number of quarters. So he is counting, and he can count roughly at 4 to 40. And so I could go ahead and divide the amount of the cost of a Lego into quarters. And what we've been doing is just play with money, play with pennies, dimes, nickels, quarters on the floor. And I'm just getting him to interact with actual money, which so often we don't get to do if we don't interact with our kids and make that happen, because we're now interacting with credit cards, plastic money, right? They see us go into a store, they see us swipe a card, and they think it's as easy as that. And so if we don't get down onto the floor and actually interact with money with them and introduce an allowance, we are, in my opinion, cutting ourselves short because we're not having conversations that we could be at a young age. So that's where I'd come from. I also had done a bit of reading, and like I'd said, read up and agreed with theories discussed in Doug Nordman's book, and loved how it was a natural conversation. So it wasn't this abstract entity that we were putting into our kids' hands. It was real.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Being a young teacher wearing an elementary hat, but then also having two kids that are 2 years apart, that 22-month girl and then the 4-year-old boy, is I could see, even though she's 22 months, she's already learning things because she's watching her brother ask for them. So we go to the store. She interacts with some of the things he's doing. She picks up the doll she wants and she puts it in the cart. And I say, well, we don't have the money for that. And so that's where we get the allowance. We have introduced an allowance once a week. It's on a Friday. We call it Allowance Day, and we get all excited about get our jars down, and they are able to play with their money and take out their money and start to juggle around and play with their coins on the floor. And then we talk about the value of money and why we keep it somewhere. We don't just scatter across the floor, because my 22-month girl is still scattering the coins and then losing interest and walking off. Whilst my boy is saying, can I grab hers? And then we're having different conversations as far as the social, emotional side as well, and values, right? But that's where the allowance came in. Natural conversation, easy to have, and why not talk to them about it young? They want things. And so having a conversation about the difference between a need and want happens naturally.
It's so funny you mentioned about the credit cards as well, because my son is almost 2, and just today he pulled my wallet off the table, opened it up, pulled out one of the credit cards, and then started walking around and going shoo, 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 as if like he was paying for things. And I was like, oh, you do watch, you do see. But yeah, the age at which these conversations start, I guess you're not going to teach kids the full like adult understanding of money at 3 years old. There's going to be levels, and that's kind of where I want to go next. But we have Julia backstage who's going to pop in and join us as well. So I want to let her come on, introduce herself, and then we're going to continue this conversation. So Maya, I'll come back to you with the allowance question. Hey, Julia.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well. How are you?
I'm good. I just put my daughter to bed. It was a little bit of a struggle, like it always is, but I'm here. I'm Julia. I'm the digital content director at Parents Magazine. So I oversee the content on parents.com and all the social channels. So.
All right, I'm shuffling everyone around so you're like, on top of your names. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, especially after putting a kiddo down. It means your one day just ended and now you started something totally different. So, and
I started this morning landing from in a plane from Hawaii. So it started.
I saw that. I saw you were in Hawaii. It's like you're joining us for a webinar tonight, but you're in Hawaii like the day before.
So far, so good.
Welcome back to reality. How are you?
Pleasure to be here. Yes, let's talk money.
All right, so we were talking about allowances. Danny, just to kind of catch you up, said that she has started an allowance for her 4-year-old and is having some great experiences with that. Maya is just about to share with us her thoughts on allowance.
Sure. So, Rob, thank you. Yeah, I actually would like to go back to something that you said before. Allowance is definitely one of those touchy subjects that there are a lot of different views on it. And I guess I've been doing this for such a long time that I've come to a realization, first of all, that when I talk to parents in some of my workshops, I always try to explain to them and not to view allowance as a gift, because a lot of times we think that, giving money to somebody, it's like gifting them money. It's like, oh, they won a lottery. This is great. They can go spend it. But I try to tell them, like, allowance is not that. Allowance is a teaching tool. It just helps our kids learn how to manage that money. And then another thing that I tell them is that I actually personally, after working with so many parents, I don't believe that there is one right approach when it comes to allowance. I've developed a framework around this actually, because I'm a firm believer that each family needs to decide what's right for them. So whether it's a chores-based approach or no chores-based approach, or it could be that hybrid approach between the two. And so I have spoken with parents who believe in chores approach, where they actually believe that their kids should be paid by doing certain chores in the house, because they want their kids to know that, it takes hard work to earn money. And then on the other side of that coin, we have parents who are like, okay, well, no, nobody's going to pay my child to make their bed or, empty out the dishwasher. They should be doing this as part of the family unit. So no, allowance should not be tied to chores. And if they don't do this kind of stuff, then we'll take away other things like video games or play dates, etc. And then that third approach is the hybrid one, which is sort of where I am with my family. And this is what we've been doing for a while. And we give allowance once a week, but we pay for chores that I would pay somebody else to do. So for example, I'll pay my kids to shred my papers, because if they don't do it, then I have to do it, or I have to take it to a local office supply store where they do it for me, and I have to pay them. My kids are also old enough now that they can wash my car. So I'll pay them to do that rather than take my car to the car wash. So they have opportunity to earn money, and they understand that, they have to work hard to earn money. But the reason why I've been giving them allowance from a very young age was mainly so that they can learn how to manage it. They can learn how to save it. They can learn how to invest it. They can learn how to spend smartly and, take advantage of coupons and all these other things. So that's kind of where I am with the allowance.
And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of what the controversial part is, whether an allowance needs to be earned, whether it is given. But I think what you also said in terms of the purpose of an allowance as a teaching tool is so important. This is not just about giving your kids money to go spend on whatever they want. It has to be something that you're using to kind of give lessons along the way. And I would love to come back and kind of think about the lessons that we do as well. But Julia, what's your thoughts on allowance?
I have a now 5-year-old. She just turned 5. So maybe I should be thinking about this a little bit more. But I think at parents, we've covered it before, a little bit of what you've already just talked about. So we want to be careful about giving kids money just for doing things that's part of running a household. And we all have to kind of pitch in and run the household together. I recently read this really great book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, which is all about, parenting in different cultures around the world. And there are certain parts of the world where kids kind of just pitch in and help with chores without ever being asked to do that. It's just kind of a given. And this book really kind of outlines how you can kind of get kids to just help and not necessarily label chores as being something that is work, so to speak. So I think it's a fine line. And for those things we're talking about, making the bed, helping to cook dinner, maybe even washing the car. But I know that there are some tasks that are, more rare, something you're not doing every day. So maybe it's weeding the garden, or maybe it is washing the car. And that might be a good opportunity to give kids allowance. And to me, it's more about giving them the opportunity to earn money, so that then you can teach them all the different ways that they can handle that money, whether that's saving. I think saving is really important, giving back, sharing that money, talking about the value of money, introducing it. So more that than a reward for doing things around the house, even though, that's a good way of kind of giving them that money. That's sort of what I think you've already touched on, but that tends to be the way we've covered it before at parents.
Yeah. We have a comment from Popeye who is kind of a slightly pessimistic view of it, that we're probably doing it wrong no matter what we're doing. But I think that kind of brings up the point that there are so many different ways to do this. And the way that works for you is probably going to be the best one that you should do, or at least probably the one that works best for your child, not even for you as the adult. It's the child we're thinking about and how they learn. So yeah, if you're noticing that your kids are just kind of blowing all their money and they haven't learned patience yet, then maybe that's where you start. And what form of allowance could help you do that? So Danny, coming back to you, what are the goals when you have an allowance? So you talked about the Legos already and the idea of saving up for something in the future. When your son says he wants to buy something, what's the conversation that you guys have? So when he wants to use that allowance, what do you guys do?
So I chuckle when you say that, because my husband is always saying to me, is there always something that you've thought through before you add it to the family? And I said, well, I try my best. It might just be my personality, or it might be the teacher in me, but I do try and have a goal in mind. So what I realize is I see two very different kids in the same household. No matter how young they are, they're going to be very different little people. And so I'm already looking and kind of taking notes mentally on who they are as little people, because I can see how their money habits are going to be different. And even though I'm parenting, in my belief, the same, they're different. And so as a result, they're going to have strengths and weaknesses in different areas that I'm going to have to touch on as a parent. And that's kind of where the teacher in me comes out, right? Looking at differentiation and differentiating your learning for kids. But my son likely could be a spender. And so one of the things that we did is we went to the store, and he immediately wanted to, I've realized that in terms of just a couple of ways that he wants to just grab things and move on, and go to the next. So why I started an allowance with him is to get me to have some of these discussions. So we went for the Lego. He looked at a Lego car that we wanted, and we didn't have enough money. Great. I got so excited that we didn't have enough money, because I got to say to him, I'm sorry, buddy, but you can't actually buy that car because we don't have enough money. Now, one of the things I do is, if the amount of the car might be $10, he has to also have enough for taxes. So I don't just let him scoop car and not do the taxes, because then I'm teaching him he can buy, and then I'm going to go ahead and just swoop in and save. So the taxes are something that he would have to take. And so that's why he didn't have enough money, because he had the amount of money going in for the car. So we had the tax discussion. Now, he's 4, so he doesn't truly understand the taxes, other than we have to give, this money goes to the government, who takes care of. It's a very surface level conversation with him. By the time we get to 3rd grade, which is where we did the classroom economy in my class, we then went ahead and had, April 15th, we talked about taxes. And so it's a deeper level conversation. So that's where an allowance came in. The other conversation that I also want to have with him is needs versus wants. So in the car, as we're going and driving there, we're having a discussion about what a need is. A need, is it needed? Is it something that I have to have for survival, basic survival, versus a want, something that I desire, right? So we're having that basic conversation there. Another great conversation that I'm having. Also with him, when we're actually playing with the money, is I'm getting to look at coin denominations and the differences between my coins. So I'm getting to tell him, this is a quarter, this is a nickel, this is a dime, this is the value. So even though at 4, he's not cognitively quite there on a developmental level in terms of the differentiation and the comparison, he's starting to have the conversation with me. So he will likely get there a little bit sooner than some of his peers, because we're already having the discussion, if that makes sense. So that's something else. The other idea is, I love to mow the lawn for our family, and I do it because it serves 2 purposes. I get a break from the kiddos, so I get to mow the lawn for a period of time, but I also get to exercise while I do it. And so it's also about healthy living habits, and that's what I'll tell my kids too. But I get him to come out with me, and I sometimes let him push the mower. So I lower the handle, and he goes ahead and pushes it. My intention down the road is that he is going to be mowing other people's grass, and that he will get some money. So that's the reason why I'm doing it, so I live it. So that was the comment that was put up earlier that I love, is living and showing our kids. They are learning from us like little sponges. So whether we like it or not, if we're not having the conversations, they're still seeing our actions. And so why not talk about some of these things? So that's kind of the longer answer to your question.
No, I mean, it's great. And there are so many different conversations that just pop up naturally, because kids have questions. They want things, they need things, they see stuff that other kids have, and they ask the question, well, why do they have that and we don't? And I think that's another conversation I want to have with you guys. And maybe that's a good place to go. Maybe next, because a couple of things popped up during that conversation about allowances that I do want to address. And Maya, I want to ask you this. Allowances being used as a consequence tool is something that I see parents do a lot. So and I think TV always kind of portrayed this as well, that when a kid had an allowance, it was something that kind of got taken away as a result of negative behavior. And it may not have had anything to do with allowances itself. It wasn't anything to do with spending or saving or anything like that. It was just another aspect, and it may not have been connected to chores either, but it was taken away as a consequence. So it was a chip on the table. How do you feel about that? Is it something that can work? Is it probably not a great idea?
So my personal belief is that it's not a great idea, just because I do believe that allowance, again, it should not be treated as a gift. We're not giving it to our kids because we are, we are giving them something, this money to just spend, any way they want to. The idea behind the allowance, it's a teaching tool. We should be expecting our kids to do something with that allowance. And that something is, again, it changes from family to family, depending on what's important to each family. In our case, our kids save money. Eventually they invest it. but they also donate to charity. I also expect from them to look for good deals. If they want to spend money, they're supposed to have goals. And I do believe that, if a child misbehaves, that perhaps there are other things that we can take away. It could be their TV time. It could be computer time, the video games, play dates. I don't know, maybe something else. But I think money or the allowance is really there to teach our children. And the way I look at allowance is, at least with my own children, and this is what I teach the parents in my workshops, is, think of it as like you're transferring the purchasing responsibility from you onto them. So a lot of times, I have these parents of teenagers that come and they're like, well, I don't know how much to give them. And I'm like, okay, well, add up all your receipts, or maybe go through your credit card and figure out how much you've spent on them for the last month. Well, now, instead of you spending this money directly and deciding whether or not you should be spending that money, you literally give them the same amount of money. That's the money that's been spent already. So it's like, it's not like you're giving them anything extra. You're just transferring responsibility from you onto them. And you are actually now going to guide them and help them make the right decisions what to do with this money. So yeah, to me, money is just a teaching tool. And I think taking money away, by taking allowance away from our kids, I feel like we're doing disservice to them.
I think so. For me, it's like when I hear of schools taking away recess as a consequence, and I'm like, well, that's part of being a healthy person. And for me, like that punishment doesn't connect with any kind of crime. Like, yes, it's something they really want to do, but at the same time, like, we want to encourage our kids to be healthy people, and it shouldn't be like a chip on the table to like say, oh, well, your physical activity is something we can take away. Julie, do you have anything you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I always sort of think like really like we should be treating. I'm a big I'm a big supporter of treating kids the way we would want to be treated as human beings. And I think as adults, like we work and we expect to get paid. Sometimes we don't always behave well, but we still get paid for the work that we do. And there would never be a situation where we were punished by not being paid in the society we live in anyway. So I always think like, would you do that to a friend or to another adult? Because, sometimes the hierarchy that we have with our kids is a little bit arbitrary. But I also think it's interesting. Another interesting topic is whether or not, and I think somebody brought it up in the comments, whether or not to reward good grades and things like that with money. And that's another interesting topic, which we've covered before on parents. Yeah. And I think a lot of the experts we've spoken to on that have spoken about rewarding the effort versus necessarily focusing on the straight A's for your kid, because like we've said before, kids vary so much. And I think just putting all that pressure on the number or on the grade or the letter doesn't always kind of like celebrate the small wins that you can see that kids are going through when they're putting in the effort. So that's another interesting topic too.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I see it on the other end as the teacher. I hear the kids, basically they'll tell me like, man, I need this A because I got a payday coming if this A is coming, or yeah, I need the D because if I don't get the D, there's a negative consequence to this that's financial in some way. And I know parents in general can be pulling at straws sometimes for ways to get their kids motivated to basically try harder in school. And this is one that they can often go to. I think it also comes with the mentality that we're approaching it with. Like if it's a reward for like, yeah, hitting a number, I think that kind of sends the wrong message. And then also that you're getting paid to do something that you should be internally motivated about. Same thing in sports. When I see kids getting paid for the number of goals they score or something like that, I'm like, that just totally sends the wrong message for what a kid should be doing. But if you're saying like, okay, we're going to treat school like a job, and if you're doing your job and executing it well, then you will get paid for that. And I think that does reward the effort. It rewards the time put in. That sort of thing. So yeah, I think there's room for it.
Yeah, like we don't not get paid if we have a bad day at work. We might get a bonus if we do really well at work, but just you think about it like that a little bit.
Yeah, and let's move into the age appropriate conversations we should be having, because I think that's a very relevant thing for a lot of parents. So Danny, you've talked about at 4 years old, we're talking different denominations, currencies, like just starting to recognize what different types of money are, maybe spotting price tags on shelves, connecting the idea that, to acquire something, you have to give something in exchange for it. So there's a trade that's happening with money for an item or a service of some sort. Anything else that you would say should be coming in around that maybe 3 to 4 year old mark?
Definitely even starting to think about setting a goal for them, kind of something to strive for. I think that also helps in terms of saving in general. So they are starting to think about a goal setting, something that they want in the future or something they want, not necessarily instant gratification. So that's even a term that I've even had with my 4-year-old, saying it's, is it something that you want right now? Can we wait? And so for our family, sometimes we talk about waiting for a period of time. So I've, the 72-hour rule that is so popular in the financial field, but taking that down to a 4-year-old level is even getting them to wait a period of time. Even, sitting at the table and having to wait until all family members are sitting at the table before they dig into their meal, right? That is a good way to talk about kind of instant gratification and self-control. And that kind of buys into a money habit. Another one that I did kind of want to touch on is that internal versus external gratification, and why are you striving for what you're striving for. And so that's what we also talk about, and that's why I differentiate an allowance from chores. So my kids will get the allowance every Friday. So my 4-year-old gets $1, and he gets it in quarters, so he gets 4 quarters. And then my 22-month babe she ends up just getting 1 quarter. And so we talk about the value, but I have a real conversation with my kid, my oldest son, about like why he gets more. And that's a conversation that we have, and we kind of discuss. And you can go as deep as your kid is ready for, depending on what you're gauging your relationship with them. So you can't say, you have it at this age. Well, my kid might be able to have a conversation that someone else's kid might not be able to. That's the strength and the differences between kids. The other side of thing that I really want to hone in on in our family is mainly just that self-control. And so that's really what I've been honing in on across all aspects, because self-control helps you down the road with money, right? And spending choices as well. So seeing what others have, seeing what others do, why do we not do that? Well, it might be a family discussion about that as well. And then also, why do we give you an allowance? Why is an allowance not the same as chore money? Do you get paid for chores? In our family, we don't get paid for chores. It's part of a member of the family thing that they have to do. They get to have odd jobs around the home that they get money for. But like they mentioned earlier, they are not things. They are things that I would probably hire out. So mowing the lawn, I mow the lawn. He's going to mow the lawn, cut, pull weeds. Other examples are, but that would not be washing the dishes, because I, as a member of a family, I have to wash the dishes. So will they. So that would be your differentiation between the two.
And do you do any sort of visual representation for like the kids so they can see like what they're saving for or how much money they have? Or is it just the physical coins themselves are the physical representation for them?
So great job. Great question. In the long term, sorry, that was capturing me. So what I've done is, for the visual representation, I've got different jars for different denominations. So we have a cash register out, and I put it at a low area that they're allowed to go and play. Now I have a 22-month babe who doesn't put things in her mouth, and so I can leave my cash register out. That's a difference. Now, if I have someone that's very mouthy and is going through a teething stage, I would recommend not to leave the cash register out with the small denominations and the coins. Another thing that I do is get the jars and I label them, and I've drawn a picture on each of them and labeled them nickels, dime, quarter, etc., so they can see it. My intention with the jar system is then to move into the 3 jars. And I do have a giveaway tonight, a free giveaway that people are welcome to kind of dabble in as they have conversations with their kids. But it talks to you a little bit about chores. It talks to you about the saving, spending, and giving, because giving is as important to our family. And I really am honing in on that and looking at other people and what they have and what they might need and how our skill set can help and support them. So giving is not necessarily always monetary. It can also be of your time and of your skill set as well.
Yeah, and I even would go with a 4-jar system where you've got spend, save, give, and invest. If like the kids are getting a little bit older and you're like, okay, let's start talking about now how to get your money to grow. But speaking of older kids, Maya, what would you do now as you're moving up into, say, like the 5 to, I would say probably like 5 to 8 is probably another good age band. what kind of things should we be talking to kids about at that age?
So I find like the courses that I've developed for these kids, the big one is everything that Danny has talked about. It's just like that's the foundation, and then I start building on top of that. So the big one is for them to actually understand debit cards, ATM machines, and not necessarily the function of the credit card, but just that the credit card is different from the debit card, and that neither of those cards mean that the parents have this infinite access to money, and how that these cards are actually tied to bank accounts, and same with ATM machine, and that we can only take out what is in the bank account. So I do a lot of visual representations where the kids can actually see that. But really interesting thing that I came across over, I don't know, teaching this in so many different classrooms. I find that kids in kindergarten, grade 1, and some kids in grade 2 have a very difficult time connecting where money comes from. So they know their parents go to work and they earn money. But for example, we did this exercise where we've actually spent money from the bank account. Now the bank account is empty. So, okay, how are we going to use our debit card? Can we use our debit card? No, we cannot, because there's no money in that bank account. So how are we going to get money in that bank account? And I found that there's actually, this is really interesting. 99% of the time, there's this disconnect that the kids don't understand that their parents work. And then this money, yes, they earn money, but then this money gets deposited into the bank account. That's how we get the money in the bank account. And I thought that's really interesting. So it's just that the flow of money and how it flows and what happens with it. And then the next thing for me that I've been teaching is definitely more on savings. I actually try at this stage to explain to the kids that, we can have short-term savings and long-term savings. And so short-term savings could be for something that's in the near future, in the next few months, that they're saving for. And, we have like certain charts that they can keep track of their saved money. And then the long-term savings, it's for a little bit later down the road. So when they get a little bit older than that age group, we would start investing. And definitely, we go more into donating. And as Danny said, it's not just the time. Sorry, it's not just the money. It can also be the donation of the time. One thing I like to do, or I've been doing with my kids, and I'm in Canada, but I'm sure that, there's something like this in US as well. When we purchase our food at a local grocery store, we have a points card. And so for every purchase, we actually earn money on this card. So the money that we earn, we actually use to purchase food for the food bank. So my kids know that this is another way of donating, and it doesn't come directly from, us, like actually taking the money out of our bank account, but it is related, because instead of us using these points on ourselves, we're giving it to somebody else.
That's a great thought. And actually, the one thing you said that I kind of questioned as well was our kids see us leave the house. They know we're going to work, but they have no idea what we're actually doing when we're there. Like, unless you actually work from home, your kids don't see what you do to earn money. And Julia, I see you kind of nodding your head there.
Well, except now. Now
now everyone gets a true insight to what mommy and daddy really do.
I do actually think that's sometimes we talk about I hate to talk about silver linings from the pandemic because it's been so awful, but and for parents, it's been especially challenging. But I think that is one of the things that, one of the people worry about kids having a learning slide, because academically, it's been a tough year of Zoom learning and everything else. But there have been life lessons that they're learning along the way. And I think one of them is that, it's been take your kids to work day. It's been every single day, for so many parents. And I think kids are finally starting to put together what it is that parents do during the day, which is pretty awesome. And there's plenty of research out there to show how beneficial it is for kids to see working parents, especially working moms, and sons to be seeing working moms, as well as daughters to be seeing working moms. And, there were a lot of women leaving the workforce. Last September was almost 900,000. And we had Kamala Harris did an op-ed for us all about that, and just how important it is to encourage parents to stay working, and the benefits of, and that's all part of the same financial conversation, the benefits of seeing your parents in a career and your mom in a career and like what that means. And, you know, there's a lot of talk around parent guilt and mom guilt for having to be working long hours. And I think for some of my mom friends, anecdotally during the pandemic, it was hard when you're working a long hour day when you were there, but not there. But all of this just meant that we were able to have conversations with our kids a little bit more about what it means to have a career and why it's important, and not just, you know, for money, but also for your identity and, you know, your value as a human and everything else. So, yeah, I think it's been the year of kids learning what jobs actually look like. But then now, of course, we're all kind of going back to the office. So I don't know if there's going to be, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be hybrid working from home for a while for a lot of people. But yeah, I think it's been a kind of cool learning lesson for kids.
Dylan just says, my son thinks I probably play video games all day because I just sit in front of the computer. And of course, like, yeah, working from home is not the same. Like for me as a teacher, like, yeah, I sat in front of a computer the entire time and taught. My son probably is like, okay, this is what he does. He just sits in front of a computer, probably like he's doing right now, and is teaching in quotation marks. But it's an opportunity to engage in conversation. Like you can talk to your kids about what you do. And then the idea that you are trading your time, your skills, your knowledge for money. So somebody else is willing to pay you for what you are able to do. And I think that's a very powerful conversation to have. And Maya, I know you've talked a lot as well about entrepreneurship for kids, and the idea of going out and earning money is something that kids can really grab onto very quickly, that there is this trade-off where I can pay for things with money, but I can also earn money. And there's going to be this inflow and outflow at the same time. Okay. So when we think about, I guess, comparison, and this kind of goes back to a question Popeye had as well. It's a really long one, so I'm going to paraphrase it, but he was asking like, well, what happens if parents don't work and you still want to instill this work ethic? And he's coming at it from the point of view of, we did it. We're financially independent. We have a second generation coming behind us that we basically don't want to spoil. The stats are showing us that by the third generation, most family wealth is lost. So how do we protect that from not happening? So do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like if you have parents who are financially independent or who are not working currently, how do they kind of instill that work ethic and that idea of trading your time, money, skills for money? Skills, you wouldn't trade money for money, but you guys get what I'm saying. Anyone want to jump in on that?
Sure, I'll go. So it's funny, actually, my son is going to be 14 in a couple of days, and we are actually considering cutting off the allowance at this point because just really quickly, going back to Danny's point, I do have two kids with different money personalities. And there's actually a really interesting book out there. It's called Raising Financially Fit Kids by Jolene Godfrey. She talks about different money personalities. So yes, like in the same household, like I am teaching about money, but I am teaching two kids similar things, yet also some different kids based on their money personalities. Like I'm trying to actually raise financially independent kids. So my son, he's naturally more of a saver. He's more interested in investing. He doesn't spend much. So he's actually okay, you know, just being cool with the allowance. He doesn't really need much. And I actually started to realize that, you know what, he has no interest in getting a job and, you know, working hard for his money. And, you know, we're in a good financial place. Obviously, this is the reason why I'm teaching this stuff, because I think everybody else can get there. But I think I'm at a point now where I think for the summer, I would like him to either start a business or just earn some money some way. And then eventually, like, I just want him to understand that it's, you know, it takes hard work to earn money. But eventually, I would like to teach him one other important thing, which I wasn't taught when I was growing up, and I only learned it later on, is that we don't always have to work hard to earn money, right? Like we can earn money from passive sources of income. And perhaps maybe we can do something once and continue to earn money from this, like, you know, building a course or writing a book or whatever. But I think it's really important for me right now to make sure that he works hard for his money. It doesn't come easy to him. And so we're going to see what the next couple of months are going to be like. We have to work on his, I don't know if it's going to be a resume. I mean, we're still under a lockdown here. So, but it could be just cutting grass for the neighbors or something, but he needs to learn this.
So I'm going to push back and say, why? if you're financially independent, if you could potentially take care of your kids and your grandkids with your family wealth for the rest of their days, why do they need a work ethic?
So it is exactly what you said, right? By the time the third generation comes around, I read the stats too. If they haven't been taught how to manage money properly, and if they don't understand the value of the hard work, that generational wealth is squandered away. And I've done some research, and I looked at Rockefellers, and I looked at Vanderbilt's, and Rockefellers actually they passed on certain generational money management knowledge from one generation to the next. Smithsonian Magazine even has a copy of a contract between John Rockefeller, I think second, and his son, and it actually details how the money is going to be handled by his son, who was a teenager at the time. And I remember a few months ago, I was actually reading this article, and it was one of the great granddaughters of the original Rockefeller. And she said that she was handed down this set of documents, and she was taught how to manage this money. And that's why Rockefellers are still around. They still have quite a lot of their fortune, whereas Vanderbilt's, that money was squandered, I think, within the second generation, because they were trying to fit into the society. I believe it was a New York society, and they were just having these lavish parties, spending left, right, and center. They didn't really spend time to teach their kids how hard it took them to actually earn that money. So I think history, if we look at the history, there is the evidence that if we don't teach our kids the importance of earning money and, of course, managing it, which is what we're talking about here, I think that chances are, they're going to lose that wealth eventually.
I guess that's my real question is, like, could we just teach them to manage money and they don't really have to learn the value of like sweating for a dollar, because all they really need to do is learn how to manage what they have. And if they can do that effectively, they will pass that wealth on to the next generation. Like, are we as parents sometimes forcing our kids to go through the same experiences we did because that's just what you do? And I know that applies to a lot of other areas of parenting, that we parent the way we were parented. Like, do we kind of feel like our kids need to kind of go through that ring of fire to earn their right to wealth? Or is there some truth to this, that like we do need to, learn the value of hard work? What do you think, Danny?
I guess what comes to mind, so I was raised in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, and I definitely do think that my upbringing does have an effect on kind of who I am as a saver. I'm naturally more that way, and kind of would rather save than kind of buy something new and the new best things. Actually, one of the things that I noticed in first coming to America, I remember actually verbalizing it to those that were around me, is this idea of new being always something that I saw, rather than secondhand items being the normal. They had they were valuable because they were well taken care of, and then they were passed on, right, in terms of the environment and all of that. So I guess it's been very important to me as well that I instill this in my kids. And so even though there might be times where I could go out and get something that's new, thinking about and talking to them also about the environment and what that does for the environment, not just from a money side of things as well, but having to have something that might be secondhand and that is as good of value until we get to the point where we actually deserve to have. And what I mean by that aspect of deserve is, you start something new, you might dabble in a new sport. Do they have to have that new tennis racket, or might they have something that's secondhand until they get to the stage where they've had the work ethic, they've put in the time and shown you that they are willing to explore the sport in depth, and then they get it. So that was an example where it doesn't necessarily have to be, that's how you could teach work ethic, right? The time that you put in, the practice. I played a college level sport, and that's what brought me to the United States. And so that kind of aspect of work ethic, and that's where I try and model it in what I do as well. So by no means perfect, and I fail every day in front of my kids, but my kids see me fail and then get to have their own personalities and see different things that they enjoy and don't like about even me as a person. And that's just the open and honest dialogue that I have with my kids as well in terms of work ethic.
So we can just model for them like how to be responsible managers of money, and a lot of that will potentially rub off on them.
So sometimes, Absolutely. That's where I would come at it. I sometimes have the internal dialogue without saying it to my kids, and I can see my little sponges sitting there, even at 4 years old, asking the questions. So if I'm having it out loud, even when I go to the grocery store now, trying to take that allowance piece and fit it back to them, is I want them to understand the value of money, right? That's a goal of mine. So it only becomes an understanding if they are able to take something that's abstract and make it meaningful to themselves. So here's an example. We go into the grocery store and my little 22-month girl loves bananas. She'll do anything for a banana. So when I go into the grocery store, we head straight to the produce section. And what I point out to her is the price of a banana. Why I point out the price or the value of the banana is I've just on a Friday afternoon given her allowance. So I've got to attempt to tell her what that value of that coin I've just given to her is, and then associated with something in her life so that there's a connection.
Thank goodness she wants bananas and not like sumo oranges, because she'd be like saving her quarters for like a decade to afford one.
Absolutely. But those are some of the conversations kind of that we have. And then she's like, she's screaming, Nana, 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 as we go down. And then I'm starting to have dialogues. In having that conversation with her, now my kids now know the value of something else. And so I'm trying to associate their allowance with something that's real, not abstract. And that would go into, wearing the 3rd through 5th grade hat, even budgeting for a pet, right? You're taking a budget, you're taking budgeting back to something that's not abstract, it's real to them. How many kids in 3rd through 5th grade are asking for a pet? Even younger. So you're teaching them how to budget and then how to budget through a pet. And that's something that I've done through the membership that I have dabbled with for 3rd through 5th grade, that self-paced course, teaching kids how to be responsible for their money.
I definitely want to come back to that at the end, so you can tell us about that. Bill asked a really great question, and Julia, I'm curious about how you would approach this. Let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. We have a family who is in a scarcity mindset. So they're not coming from the abundance side and trying to teach kids like, okay, you need to have a work ethic. Even though we have the money, I need you to learn how to earn it. Opposite side, we have families who are, their first generation trying to build wealth, or even just trying to get by so that their kids can be that first generation to build wealth. How do we prevent kids from having that scarcity mindset for the rest of their lives and being afraid to basically just spend money ever?
That's a really good question. I think, well, first of all, I think it's okay to talk to kids. We've talked about the needs versus wants. I think it's okay to talk to your kids about not, like today we can treat ourselves this way, but maybe tomorrow we can't necessarily. And then some of the things you can do with your kids, like we talk about parents, we talk about getting that roping them into comparison shopping, having them clip coupons, or I guess whatever the equivalent is with coupon apps. So I think that there's a lot you can do in terms of talking to your kids about not necessarily building wealth, but budgeting and saving money and having them help create the family budget. But I mean, from my point of view, I think, you don't need a lot of money to build wealth and like start investing and start saving. So I think maybe even, you could have that conversation about not necessarily having everything, but just even breaking off a small amount of whatever you do have and showing them how that small amount could potentially earn interest, or that small amount might be able to be something that you can afford to invest and builds wealth slowly, but every little and we always talk about how like the most important thing to have in building wealth is time, right? And obviously your kids have all the time in the world, well, more time than we do as older adults. So I think it's about having those conversations too, to say like, you don't need a lot of money to build wealth over time, and they do have the time to do that. So start small and talk to them about investments, talk to them about saving early. That's not something that my family did. It was a very different approach. My family never talked about money at all, and sort of would just blindly use credit cards. And then I kind of came out into an adult world being like, ooh, credit cards, free money. So I had to really teach myself about saving and money. And you start saving when you can start saving, but obviously I wish someone had had that conversation earlier with me. And, that's coming. And I'm not somebody who comes from a family with lots of wealth, nor do I have a lot of, I'm a journalist. So, but I still feel like I've been able to build savings and slowly but surely, and investments and, my Roth IRA and everything else. So, and 401k and those conversations. And you can build wealth even when you don't necessarily have a lot of it. And, it may not be a lot of wealth, but you can build towards that. have goals.
And this is kind of naturally going towards now the conversations that you have with your kids at home about your own financial situation. So whether you have a lot of money or you don't have much at all, if things are really great, things are really tough, how much of your family's, I guess, money situation is appropriate to share with your kids? I've seen both spectrums. I've seen the kids who are very aware of how much money their parents have, and they're like, I don't need to work. I've got, my life is set. I'm good. And then the opposite end, I have kids who are working full time, contributing to the finances of the home. One kid in particular comes to mind where parents don't speak English. She's handling all of the financial transactions for their family because she's acting as the translator for them. So she's aware of all the bills, all the bank statements, everything. And it's so much for this person to be carrying. And I think that's not appropriate either. So Maya, what do you think? What's the appropriate amount to share?
So that's a really good question. I actually think when, many times, parents actually ask me that question, and I usually ask, how old is your child? Because I think before we start sharing with our kids, we need to understand why they're asking. So we need to, for example, understand, like if it's a child that's come to us, like, why do you want to know? And that will give us a better context of, what's going on, and also how much we can potentially share. But it also depends on their age, right? And whether or not this is something that, if I share how much money I make in a year, is that going to go, is that going to be next story in our neighborhood, right? So I know with our own kids, we don't tell them everything, but over the years, we have been disclosing more and more information. I do have a teenager, as I said, and I have a tween. And so they know approximately how much money we make. I share my property tax bill with them. And, they can see what our house is evaluated at on that property tax bill. They usually ask me, they're like, well, in this real estate market, how much do you think we can get for our house? And, they know they are, we are wealthy. I mean, but I was one of those kids that, you were just asking about earlier. When we came to Canada, I lived in shelters. I lived in government housing. So we didn't have anything. So, we kind of went from, bottom to, where I am. But I always make sure that I tell my kids, this is mine and daddy's money. And, don't count on it. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, they understand how much we have. But the reason why I say that is because exactly what you mentioned, Rob. I actually used to go to high school with someone who was a good friend of mine. And I remember every time I was stressing about a test or something like that, she would always say to me, oh, don't worry about that. And I said, what do you mean, don't worry? Aren't you stressed? And she'd be like, no, you know what? My parents have $1 million trust fund set up for me. And that really stayed with me to this day because, we take care of our kids and, we're teaching them, but I just don't want them to count on us. And that's hence the reason why I really want my 14-year-old to go out there and get a job. I want him to start respecting money and earning money. I think that's personally important to me. But then again, as I said at the very beginning of this, I do believe that there is no one right way of teaching kids about money. I think number one thing, or actually two things that are extremely important, three things. Number one, mindset, right? Like our mindset as a family. Number two, our beliefs. And then number three, if there are two parents in the picture, they need to agree on how and what we're going to teach our kids. So what I'm teaching right now definitely may not resonate with everybody who's watching this, but this just works for us.
Yes. And then I guess on the opposite side, like if you are in a negative financial situation, you're sharing enough that, if your kids are asking like, well, why does that person have all of these amazing things and we don't? That's a hard question, I'm sure, for a parent to answer. And you have to find a level where you're saying like, okay, I'm answering this question in an honest way. I'm not lying to my child, but at the same time, like I'm not trying to dump all of our stress on their shoulders as well. Like there are definitely things that kids should be aware of, and there's things that they just don't need to be aware of right now.
Right. And if I may just add to that, my answer to something like that would be, My parents didn't answer it that way, but I think it's that abundance mindset. And my answer to something like that would be like, okay, well, they have it. We don't have it yet. But this is what we as a family are doing to put ourselves in a financial position so that we could afford that, whatever that may be. And, if they're old enough, I would share my goals with them in terms of like, okay, this is what we're doing. Perhaps we want to get a better home. And, if I have a teenager, okay, this is how much we're saving so that we can put a down payment on a home or something along those lines.
Yeah. And I like the comment down here from Papa again. So like, we don't know how much they have. We only know how much they spend. And I don't know if that's a Millionaire Next Door reference or not, but it certainly goes along that same theme. It's a wonderful book if you haven't read it. Just talking about people and how they present themselves publicly is not a true story of how they are behind closed doors. So like we don't know what other people's finances are like, and you very likely will not get to know unless you have somebody who's very willing to share. So helping your kids to recognize that the public appearance that people are putting on is not always the true story, and that you need to concern yourself with your own story first and foremost. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. I do want to wrap up. Julia, is there anything you want to share with our audience about maybe what you're currently working on, links that they should check out, anything like that?
Sure. So we have plenty of things on parents.com around finance. So we have like an age by age guide to teaching kids about finance, and we talk about allowances. So we really have covered, we try and answer every question anyone would ever have about parenting on parents.com. So we probably, if it's a question you have, we probably have it there. But I am working on a spotlight on growing up in poverty, as and how that can affect children, because that I think is really interesting, especially coming out of the pandemic when we saw so many instances where like broadband, like the concept of universal broadband, like a lot of these kids didn't even have access to internet and are sort of expected. So I think it's interesting to see that effect and have a bit more about that conversation. But I also think just like it's important to talk to your kids about social injustice and things like that. I think it's also, kids love talking about fairness and unfairness. And I think it's also good to have a conversation with kids about how it is unfair that there's poverty in America. Like it is unfair that, that kids in one of the richest countries in the world are still, not eating breakfast and not getting, don't have access to other things we have. So I think that those are conversations you can have really young with kids, and you should have really young with kids. So as much as we should be talking about wealth and finance, I think it's also important to talk about the kids, that they may know very well who have less than.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. When will that article roughly be?
So we're trying to build out this whole spotlight for the fall, so in September time. So follow us on Instagram.
Follow that space, yes.
Watch this space, yes.
Okay, Maya, you have a summer camp that you want to tell us about, right?
Right. Yeah. So this summer, I'm offering an online summer camp. It's just 1 hour a day for 5 days. And it's for kids ages 11 to 18. And we cover basics of money management, including budgeting, basics of investing, credit cards, debt, financial fraud, and identity theft. And it's actually a lot of fun. So it's not a boring camp. We play games, and that hour flies by, and the kids have a lot of fun. So, check it out on my website. There are a lot of video testimonials, and it should be fun if you enroll your child.
And you can see the link for her website. I'm scrolling through the bottom there. It's denari.com/book-online. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. Danny, what do you got going on for us? You hinted at something earlier.
I did. I kind of just want to start before going into that, roughly summing up what Maya had said roughly about beliefs. And that kind of goes and stems back into kind of even why I do what I do, right? Trying to encourage kids to formulate and think about what they value, and then also the beliefs as a family. And so we all know that it's shouldn't just fall on parents. It takes a village. And so we're trying to passionately, give all of this information to as many people as possible, which is why here at ChooseFI, we've created a pre-K through 12 curriculum that's free. It is free for a reason, because we want to get it into as many people's hands as possible, get people learning about the content. But If there is a parent that is able to go ahead and jump in on a membership, I do have one at ChooseFI.com/Finlit Family. So what this membership is, it's a 14 video membership. It's a self-paced membership. So it's for 3rd through 5th graders to learn basic financial concepts. And so it takes them through needs versus wants, budgeting for a pet, money management, and how to talk about risk as kids. And what I do is I go ahead and talk to the kids about these concepts. We stop during parts. The videos are roughly 25 minutes in terms of in length, but they are attempted to take a 40 to 60 minute span. They are meant to be self-paced and also child-directed and child-friendly. So as the parent, what that does is takes the pressure off of you having to teach them some of these concepts, and then they can come back to you and have conversations with you about these. And we all know at the end of the day, when we're exhausted and juggling a lot, particularly coming off of a pandemic, that it might be somewhat useful to have another approach to learning some of these concepts. So like I said, ChooseFI.com or ChooseFIFoundation.org/pre-K through 12. That's going to get you to all of those free resources, and then jump in on the summer series. We're going to be talking about a lot of other great concepts, and we have one next week, Rob, that you might talk a little bit too.
Yes, so we are here every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can find our full list of events at ChooseFIFoundation.org/events. Our streams are on YouTube, Facebook, and actually there's a stream on LinkedIn too, if anyone's looking to pick it up there. So yeah, I hope you join us. Next week, we're going to be talking about meal planning. So looking at the food budget in someone's finances. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how you bring your kids into that conversation, because it is a great entry point for kids. But this is more so going to be about, how do you take control of one of the biggest spending categories in your budget. So hope you'll join us next week, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. As for me, I'm Rob Phelan. What I'm currently working on is a kid's book called M is for Money. It's an ABCs of Money book that introduces 3 to 8-year-olds to age-appropriate money words. And then it also tries to normalize having conversations about money. Really, one of the aims is to try and reduce the amount of kind of like shame, guilt, taboo that money typically gets in our society, and just get kids used to like asking questions, talking about it in an age-appropriate way. So what we were talking about tonight. You can find more information about that at misformoneybook.com. All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you, especially you guys being on the panel tonight and giving up an hour of your time to talk to us about money. To you guys at home watching, thank you so much. We would love if you could like the video, subscribe on the YouTube channel, share it with anybody who you think might be interested in seeing this message. We appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to talk
Thank
to you.
you. Bye.
Bye.